Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the public tuning in. Welcome to the meeting of Audit and Governance Committee on Thursday, the 7th of September 2023. Before we progress to the items on the agenda, can I ask the officer for the housekeeping rules, please?
Thank you. Good evening. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and mute or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. And if you're accessing via Teams and you'd like to speak on an item, please indicate by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Braidley Road, under the flyover, or in the surface car park at the front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 1, apologies. Have we received any apologies?
None received.
Okay, we are one short at the moment, Councillor Mrs Salmon, but she may be joining us later. Therefore, I've got no apologies. We've got under item 2, substitute members. We don't have any substitutes members at all nominated. Under item 3, declarations of interest. I believe Councillor Beasley wants to.
Thank you, Chairman. For transparency at item 6 on the agenda, the external auditor has referenced a property owned by a client of mine in his report, although it is not a matter in which I'm involved with my clients.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item 4, confirmation of the minutes. We need to agree and confirm and sign as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of July. The minutes are attached to the agenda. Is there any comments? Is anybody willing to propose? Also second it, please.
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Wade, yes, thank you.
Happy to second.
Fine. Item 5, public issues. This is to receive any public questions, statements and petitions. I believe we have a couple of public questions. And can I call Mr. Alex McKinstry to the table, please? Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Chair. Shall I press on?
Yes, please, far away.
Okay, question 1. The report on the Constitution, which backdrops item 7 on tonight's agenda, looks at rebranding the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee, renaming it the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and increasing its meetings from 5 to 10 in any municipal year. So we're told on page 81 of tonight's reports pack, paragraph 16, third bullet point. But then in the proposed model on page 88, and in the proposed rewording of the Constitution, Article 6, Sub-Article 3, Sub-Sub-Article 1, Sub-Sub-Sub-Article A, we're told that meetings will increase to 12 in any municipal year. So can the Chair confirm which is the correct proposed figure? Is it 10 or 12?
Thank you for your question, Mr. McKinstry. I can confirm that the reference to 10 meetings in paragraph 16 to this report is incorrect, and that this should read 12 meetings in line with the remainder of the report. And I believe you've got another question.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, and question 2, the same report states the cost of additional meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, excluding any increase in the Chair's SRA, would be £14,700 per year. But then in paragraph 27, we read that if the wider changes to committees are introduced, the additional costs would rise to something like £56,000 per year. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that these wider changes to committees comprise the proposed changes to the Planning Committee, to models of governance, for community engagement and traffic regulation order decision making, all of which are referenced in paragraph 11 of the report. So can you confirm whether this is correct? And can we have some description of what these proposed changes to other committees and other processes are? Because this is the first I've heard of them.
Thank you, Mr. McKinsky. The additional costs highlighted in paragraph 27 would support the potential changes to the planning committee and the traffic regulation order decision-making arrangements. The details of these arrangements have not yet been determined and do not form part of these papers. It would not be appropriate to speculate at this stage on these matters, but I can advise that it is the intention that a separate report will be brought to this committee in November for consideration.
That's most useful. Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry I'm late, guys. The buses were a nightmare. Have I missed anything exciting?
No, welcome to the committee, Mr. Sun, Councillor Sun. Item 6, this is the external auditor's annual report 2021/2022 and 2022/23 value for money arrangements. Basically, the council has an external auditor, Grant Thornton, and they are required to consider whether the council has put in place proper arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of its resources. The auditors are required to report on the commentary on a whole range of matters, and there is a very detailed report which is attached to the agenda. We do have joining us online this evening Peter Barber, I believe, of Grant Thornton, and he is going to give a presentation and an overview of his very detailed and comprehensive report. But can I just say now, I congratulate and thank Grant Thornton for the intense work that they have put in preparing this report in effectively a tight deadline. And you know, I now welcome Mr. Barber to give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. And Chair, thank you very much for that introduction. Good evening, committee. I'm conscious there's a number of new members of the Audit and Governance Committee, so just to remind everybody in attendance that our role as your external auditors is twofold. The main role is to give an opinion on your financial statements, but the role extends within the public sector to provide a separate view on the arrangements that the council has in place for delivering value for money in its use of resources. So as the chair said, this sets out our findings for the 2 financial years 21/22 and 22/23 in relation to value for money. So it starts on page 25 of your agenda pack, and it requires us to make a judgment as to whether, in our view, the council does or does not have appropriate arrangements in place to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness. I'm actually joined on the call today by my colleague, Jonathan Meek, who is part of the local government advisory team within Grant Thornton, and he is a key contributor to this report. And Jonathan is here in a support role to help me should there be any particularly difficult questions following my presentation. So, as the chair said, I am conscious that this is a very detailed report. I will take it as read. We make no apologies for the fact that it is so long. It reflects the requirement under the NAO, the National Audit Code, to be more explicit and more detailed in the commentary regarding each of the areas we look at. You'll probably be pleased to know I'm not going to go through every page of the report, but instead talk you through some of the key messages before I do that. It would probably be helpful just to set the scene a little bit. And probably one thing to clarify at the very beginning, VFM, value for money, means lots of things to lots of different people, but from an external audit perspective in the public sector, it focuses on 3 areas. It focuses on financial sustainability, governance, and the third area is improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And when we undertake this BFM work, we can make a series of judgments and issue recommendations. And there are different levels of recommendations indicated by the level of severity and concern that we have of arrangements in place. So I'm going to take you, if I can, to page 75, and I'll give you a couple of seconds just to get there. Appendix B of your report pack. So it's Appendix B within our report, and this sets out the different type of recommendations that we can make as your external auditors. And as I said, this is influenced by the nature of the findings. So at the top of page 75, you'll see that the most serious type of recommendation that can arise from a piece of VFM work is a statutory recommendation. And we reserve these for the most serious concerns over arrangements at audited bodies. Importantly, for BCP, we are not proposing any statutory recommendations at this stage based on the work undertaken to date, but I will caveat that shortly. It is fair to say that a statutory recommendation is really the nuclear option. It is rare, but it's not becoming as unusual as it used to be. And I think that probably reflects the ever-increasing challenges facing local government and the need for them to innovate and, dare I say, take more risk. Some of you that are following the press closely will be aware of a particularly large council that's been in the press recently. But if I think of some other examples, you know, Slough springs to mind with particular concerns around financial capacity and reserves. Sandwell is another interesting one where the statutory rec was issued because of a breakdown in relationships between member and senior officers, and Warrington, where they had lots of accounting issues around investment properties and accounting. So that is the highest level of recommendation that can arise from an auditor's work in relation to VFM. The next level down are what we call key recommendations, and these arise when, on balance, we do not think that the council has effective arrangements in place in a particular VFM area. And you'll see in the summary in this report that we have a number of these. We have 4 key recommendations in the first year, 21-22, and this increases to 5 key recommendations in 22-23. So this is of some concern, and I will take you through that detail of each of those recommendations in a moment. And then finally, just to complete that particular page, the lowest level recommendations are what we call improvement recommendations. And these are lower level, and they're all about really improving and reflecting best practice and building on the existing arrangements at the council that is deemed to be appropriate. And you have a number of these, and that is always the case in reports of this nature across all local government bodies, because they're about refining and learning from best practice. So that's a bit of background about the recommendations that appear in the report. So what I'm going to do now is take you back, if I can, to the key judgments, and probably the best place to start is on page 27 of your papers, which is within the executive summary, and you'll see a table on that particular page summarizing the scores that I've just outlined. So you'll see that we've used a color coded RAG rating here, and you'll see that it's almost a sea of red, which is clearly not a great position for the council to find itself in. What we've got for 22-23 is we've got 2 key recommendations that relate to 2 significant weaknesses in relation to financial sustainability. We've got 1 significant weakness in relation to governance, and we've got 2 significant weaknesses in relation to economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And essentially what that means is that for 21-22, we think that arrangements aren't sufficient and aren't effective in 2 of the 3 areas we look at. And for 22-23, we think all areas are not sufficient and that arrangements need to improve. So given the seriousness and the extent of these weaknesses, we would be expecting the council to demonstrate significant improvements in arrangements And as I alluded to earlier, if that is not forthcoming, then I don't rule out the need to issue a statutory recommendation going forward. I suppose for the longer standing members of this committee, you will recall back in October last year, I presented our 2021 BFM report. And this was the first one under the new NEO enhanced code. And at that meeting, I raised considerable concerns about arrangements and made a number of recommendations for improvement. So now you've received 2 such reports raising concerns. And, you know, one of the things I would implore the council to do is to take urgent action to ensure that all recommendations in this report are acted upon as a matter of urgency. So it is a serious report. It is concerning, but I think it would probably be helpful just to take you through the 3 areas in a little bit more detail. So if I start with financial sustainability, that starts or is summarised on page 28. This is all about the ability for you to plan and manage your limited resources to continue to deliver services into the future. It's about balancing the books into the medium term, and we recognise that that is not easy. Grant Thornton audits 200 plus local government bodies, and we see across the country most councils to varying degrees struggling to balance the books. And the resilience of financial plans are really being challenged like never before. And I think it's fair to say that the challenge at BCP is compounded because you are bringing together current tenants, you're bringing together 3 predecessor councils, very different arrangements, work in practice, and you're trying to move them into one streamlined council and take advantage of economies of scale. Demands on your services are changing, they're increasing, and you're having to re-engineer the way you provide services to reflect these changing needs. And the importance of re-engineering service provision is critical. But to transform, you require money and it takes time. And without effectively transforming the council, you will not be able to balance the books into the medium term. And in order to implement your transformation programme, you need the money there to do it. You need the time and commitment. And that is something that the council is struggling to do. For the years in question, we have again concluded that the council continues to adopt an overtly high-risk alternative funding strategy to deliver transformational efficiencies. The focus on minimising council tax increases, the focus on avoiding significant cuts to services. That approach is not and has not delivered the desired outcomes. The high risk approach that I referred to last year, that I'm referring to again in this report, the reliance on use of resources, use of reserves to support budgets, that's resulted in a further depletion of your revenue reserves, as the expected efficiencies from the transformation programme are not realised in accordance with the original timetable, and they're pushed back into later years. So there is action that's required, and I'm not saying that I'm not advocating a completely risk-averse approach to council decision making. We recognise that the financial challenges do require difficult decisions. Decisions need to be taken by BCP that will be very difficult, and often that requires you to be brave and accept a degree of risk. But as that risk increases, it becomes even more critical that you have coherent alternatives developed, and that you have a plan to implement should the risks materialise, and that you are properly considering all the alternatives. And during the period of review, I think often the problem was that the council was not willing to accept that it cannot just spend its way out of the challenges. But you are now what? You are four and a bit years old, the council, and I think it's fair to say that we would have expected more progress on transformation. And on that basis, that is why we are concluding that the financial sustainability arrangements are not effective. And the 2 recommendations are set out in the report along with management's response. So that's the first area. So governance is the second area, and that's on page 29. So governance
Peter,
is an interest. Sorry,
Peter,
Chair.
I
can see a hand up. Yeah.
Sorry, Peter, can I just ask something on that? So you've said that we're behind on the transformation agenda, what do you base that on? Is there similar authorities that have done something along the same lines that have gone quicker? I'm just curious. That caught my attention that you thought we were behind on that, and I'd like to know why.
Yep, through you, Chair, if I may. So in terms of in relation to other authorities, absolutely not. I'm making that judgment against your own transformation programme and the original timelines for realising efficiencies, and when they are materialising and assisting in balancing the budgets and avoiding the need in future years to rely on reserves to set a balanced budget.
Thank you. Can I ask that you let Grant sort of finish his presentation? In fact, after Mr. Roberts presented what he wants to say, I'm going to be bringing in the portfolio holder to make some comments as well, because that may answer or clarify some things for you once you've heard the whole presentation. Thank you.
I've got the attention of a fish, you know, so I do have to ask. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and just for benefit of all on this at this meeting, I was deliberately going into a bit of detail, and I've probably only got another couple of minutes to go. So if you just bear with me, I am getting towards the end. So just want to pick up, as I said, the final two areas. So the second area is governance, and for governance, for the first year under review, 21-22, we found no evidence of significant weaknesses in the council's governance arrangements for ensuring that decisions are based on complete and accurate information. However, and as set out in quite a lot of detail in this report, although not explicitly identified in that year, we were aware of concerns around decision making, particularly, I think, a view that an overtly administration-led decision making that was perhaps not always having sufficient regard to advice from statutory officers, which we think was generally sound, but despite that, decisions being made that didn't always concur with what was being advised. And I suppose this came to our attention fully in the second year review 22-23, probably around about Christmas time, so Christmas 2022, when you were well progressed as a council in setting your or going through the budget setting round for 23-24. So this was raised to us and brought to our attention initially by statutory officers within the council, and referenced the suggestion of late amendments to the indicative 23-24 budget. And that resulted in us needing to intervene. And within this letter, you'll see, and it's come to a previous meeting of this committee, a formal letter that I issued to the Chief Exec and Section 151 officer to ensure that any decision making by the administration had to have proper regard to governance best practice. And the detail behind that is set out for you to digest on page 32 of your papers. So this was not a formal use of our statutory powers, but we were sufficiently concerned over the possibility of those late amendments without appropriate due diligence to take the unusual step of issuing that letter. And that's the main justification for the weaknesses in arrangements in governance in the second year. And we've supplemented that with, I think, 7 improvement recommendations covering both years on other actions that can be taken to further strengthen governance. The third area, economy, efficiency and effectiveness. So this is on page 29, and there's some similarities with the previous report here in that, once again, for both years under review, we're reporting significant weaknesses in relation to the council's capacity to improve children's services. And this really reflects the inadequate rating that had been issued in December 21 that remains in place, and the statutory direction issued by the Department for Education. But we've got an extra one in here compared to the 2021 review, and that's really in relation to the decision making, and it sort of links back with what I've said previously. The transformation programme, BCP Future Places, other projects and initiatives, particularly capital projects, and pertaining really to the process for scrutinising business cases. Are those business cases balanced and fair? Are they highlighting not just the rewards of a particular initiative, but are they fully explaining the risks? And are there also alternatives being provided that are balanced, as well as the do nothing option? And we've seen a number of examples there where we think there is scope for improvement there. And those two issues result in the weaknesses in arrangements in that third area. So there has been some changes, and there has been some recent improvements, I think, early signs. Clearly, this review is up until the end of March 23. We're conscious there's been a change in administration following the elections, and we have seen some early indication that there is a change in approach to decision making, with a clearer view, I think, amongst decision makers that the council can no longer continue on its current path, and a more prudent, dare I say, cautious approach to governance and decision making is needed. If I reflect back over the last 6 months on financial challenges, I do take some assurance from the recent actions to mitigate some of the immediate financial challenges facing the council. It would be remiss of me not to mention that the capitalisation direction, to the best of my knowledge, has now been taken off the table. I think that would have been a very detrimental thing for the council. So I commend that. I'm also conscious that provisions are being made for some potential costs down the line, particularly around the role of BC future paid places. And I also did read in some detail the report that went to Cabinet in July, the MTFP update, which does fundamentally rebase the MTFP and does provide, in my view, a better representation of the scale of the challenges facing the council into the medium term, and some of the actions that are required to bring the council back onto a sustainable footing. This is a really good first step. The challenge will actually be action in those changes, and that challenge shouldn't be underestimated. I'm probably, Chair, going to stop there because I'm conscious I've probably gone on too long, but I will be more than happy to take any questions on what I've just said or anything in the detailed report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Barber. As indicated before, we'd like to bring in Councillor Mike Cox at this juncture. Mike is the portfolio holder for finance. He's also a chartered auditor, and he's got skills which he's brought to this council from being, I think, on a London council as well. So, Mike, can you add to what's been presented so far with some of your observations, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you've oversold me a little bit there, but I'll do my best. I want to actually thank Pete Barber for this report, because it basically says a lot of things, if not everything, that we've been banging on about for the last 2 or 3 years, that this council has been going down a slippery slope in terms of the risks it was taking, in terms of not raising enough income from sources it could do, not making the cuts in terms of expenditure that it needs to, and not getting on with the transformation, which is absolutely desperately needed in order to turn the finances of this council around. I just wanted to actually go back and, if you'll excuse me, Pete, I'm going to read some of the words I think it was you, or maybe even your predecessor, had said in the 1920 value for money report, which says, this is after the first year of operation of BCP, that BCP Council has managed its first year of existence in an effective way, and throughout has been focused on ensuring its financial sustainability. The Council reacted quickly to COVID-19. It focused on measures to achieve financial sustainability. It was driving efficiencies across potential coastal economic powerhouse, and it was very much about transformation, and it represented the existential threat to the financial sustainability of many councils. That was, as far as I was concerned, that was a good report for a council in its first year, and from then on, it's got steadily worse. And I think Mr. Barber quite rightly talked about, I think, the report a year ago in terms of 2020 and 21, where shall we say, we had a healthy debate, I feel, and we about where things were going. And I disagreed fundamentally with Mr. Barber about governance, because as far as I'm concerned, it's governance which makes things go wrong. And there was an extremely lack of governance started really from about 2 or 3 years ago, which has helped us get to this position now. And actually, and to my mind, and I appreciate Mr. Barber has certain ways of doing things and marking our report card in certain colours at certain times, but I felt certainly the governance should have been, the red line should have been enhanced quicker than they were. But I welcome the report, and I welcome the significant weaknesses that you've highlighted, which we will be working on, as well as the improvement recommendations. And I think, and I'm glad that he's actually he's commented on the fact that things have changed, and they have changed fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned. Out has gone mythical savings that have been reported time and time again in certain budgets, and I'm only willing to accept real savings and real efficiencies that go into an MTFP and a budget, because otherwise we're just conning ourselves. So I'm glad that he's recognised that in the first few months. As he quite rightly said, there is a huge distance to go before we can turn this ship around, because we are in a desperate state. And I'm glad he used the words that there's going to be some, I think he used the words anyway, painful decisions, difficult decisions to make going forward, because that's what I've been banging on about, I suppose, for the last 6 months. We haven't taken those yet, and we will have to take those. So as a council, we need to brace ourselves to make some very, very hard decisions. I would just want to comment on a few things in terms of the governance section. I might be wrong, but I think your dates on your governance summary may be wrong. You may have advanced them by a year or two, well, by a year at least. So I think it should be, you talk about 22, 23 and as part of 23, 24. That may be slightly wrong. And I think in the first section it was 20, should be 2021 rather than 21, 22. But that's just a typo as far as I was concerned. I would comment that the comments that the auditors quite rightly said about children's services, I honestly believe that that's on a road to recovery, and certainly we've had a report recently about children's services which is quite complimentary. We're actually we're definitely on the road to improvement, and long may that continue. We have actually invested, even in the desperate states we're on at the moment. We have put more money into children's services to try and improve the position we're in and get ourselves out of the hole that we're in. So I think certainly on children's services, we've started to make big improvements. In decision making, we have certainly changed the decision making process of this council since May. And but I welcome the report, as I said, and I look forward to those reds being eliminated over time.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Before I put it open for questions, there is one comment I should make, and probably bring Nigel Stannard on this. On page 64 of the agenda, which is actually page 40 of the Grants Auditor report, there are 3 or 4 paragraphs about the Bayside restaurant, and what it says is what it says. But we can't bring or discuss that this evening, because Mr. Stannard, if you could just explain, I think there's a report coming to our next meeting on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You're absolutely correct. We said at our last core meeting in July that there's a current review ongoing. The internal audit report is done, but management are now considering that internal audit report and with a view to taking the appropriate action. And what we said at the last meeting was, it would be best to both report the internal audit report and the action taken in one go rather than piecemeal. So that full report will be coming to our next meeting in October, our next core meeting in October.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Connolly, I think you told me earlier you had a couple of questions or queries. One of the new councillors, far away with your questions too, Mr. Barber, perhaps.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So one thing I'm quite keen to get clear an idea of is how many of these significant weaknesses are addressed just by virtue of the change in administration, and how much are going to be persistent and reflective of council systems and processes. So, for example, on the governance, weakness and recommendations, it looks like a lot of it was to do with the approach taken by the individual decision makers, the previous portfolio holders, previous leader and deputy leader of the council. I'm looking at page 52, where you say, "We still consider this weakness in arrangements to be reflective of a wider undermining of statutory officer advice if it was not viewed as consistent with the preferences of the then administration." So what I'm keen to understand is, to what extent is it just the fact that the previous administration had very clear ideas of what they wanted to do and were not listening to council advice, and to what extent our systems and processes could be improved to mitigate that risk?
So I think none of them will change just purely as a result of the administration change. It is how the new decision makers, and the new decision makers being the new administration, advised by statutory officers, make those decisions going forward. And not only how they make those decisions going forward in terms of things like the transformation programme, BCP, future places, but also how they make those decisions in terms of the core services. So, for example, children's services, and I do acknowledge Councillor Cox's observation about children's services and some positive signs that have emerged from recent interim inspections, but nonetheless, the council does remain inadequate, and I see across the country councils that are inadequate in that area. It is incredibly difficult to get out of that inadequate rating, and invariably requires lots of time, commitment, and money. And you do not have a lot of spare money available to continue to fund that extra spend that is inevitably required to bring about change indefinitely. So all the decisions that are made, whether they be day-to-day service decisions or some of the more innovative or transformational stuff, it is all about how the council does that, the arrangements and the controls that underpin all those decisions. And they will invariably impact on the finances, because decisions will include the annual budget setting round, approval of the medium-term financial plan, where your priorities are, where the cuts will be. So that will impact on that first area. Governance, absolutely, we will be looking to see that the new administration is having regard to advice from officers. Ultimately, they are the decision makers, and clearly, if they take decisions that are not consistent with statutory officer advice, and that proves to be a good decision, then we won't criticise. But if you are not having regard to officer advice and continually find yourself in a position where the position is deteriorating, then as auditors, we will raise that. And ultimately, if your services aren't being delivered to the required level, then we will continue to report on that until that improvement is achieved.
Okay, thank you. I suppose that leads on to my next question, which is on the progress of the transformation programme. It would be helpful specifically to understand a bit more detail about the transformation operational savings. I'm quite keen to understand, as a new councillor, how those savings were sized and the process behind that, and how that is going to be changing. So I'd be quite keen to hear on your reflections and the portfolio holders' reflections on how those savings have been estimated.
Within the report, you will see that there are observations made about the clarity of reporting of delivery of transformational efficiencies and savings against the projected transformational programme. And I think we have found it difficult to absolutely nail down exactly what is being achieved every year, recognizing that the transformation program is organic and it's evolving, and it has increased exponentially in its coverage, so it often becomes difficult. But generally, there is a clear view that there has been slippage, and it may well be that the original transformation program, and when it was first established, some of those efficiency targets were, dare I say, slightly ambitious in terms of amounts and timing of realization. But clearly, when you have a medium-term financial plan predicated on that, the timing and the amounts of efficiencies, and they don't deliver, then that puts further strain on the budget, requires further use of reserves, and with a approach that is predominantly maintaining spend with very little in the way of actual cuts to services, then invariably you're going to run out of money very quickly if that's not resolved. So that would be my reflection on the challenge ahead.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Phipps, you indicated.
Yeah, I was going to ask something, well, mention the transformation programme, but first of all, I would just like to say that what is pretty obvious is this administration has inherited pretty much a disaster from the last 2 years. And there's so many things that are actually mentioned in this report, such as the large debt thresholds, an out of control, in my view, transformation programme, absolutely disastrous. Future places, the sale of illegal beach huts, illegal sale, not illegal beach huts, illegal sale of proposed illegal sale of beach huts. The stuff that has come through, the Bayside restaurant, I know we're not talking about it, but it's in here. I also called to this committee things to do with the bounce back grants. You all know about that, and there's been complaints about that. There's so many things I could go on and on that I could cite, and I'm sure that others in this room or others who are not even in this room could do the same. Many of us didn't vote for them. It all got pushed through. It was definitely a governance issue, in my view, that has caused a lot of this. Obviously, we've now had a government report and a best value notice as well. And this report of yours, Mr. Barber, is very much in line with what the government is saying. So it's obvious there are huge problems that have been caused by, in my view, the last administration. And just coming on to the transformation programme, I've been saying for ages that it's a problem. It is a problem, and you can see it here. It hasn't achieved. What has it achieved? Pretty much nothing. Who is in charge of this? Who's dealing with this? What are we getting out of it? It's like smoke and mirrors. It just seems to be a myth to me. And it's all about deliverability. The portfolio holder has said that it is very important that we have the transformation programme because that's where the savings are. I mean, when we went into LGR, we were going to have loads and loads of savings, weren't we? Where are they? What happened? Nothing. You know, it's pretty disastrous. So my question, I don't know if you can actually answer it, it is about the transformation programme. It's all about deliverability of it to make the savings. Do you believe that what we have here as a transformation programme is actually deliverable and we are going to get some savings? Or do you think there should be a complete review of it? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the simple response to that question about whether the current transformation programme is capable of delivering what's required. That would be something that I would urge the council to, and I understand that is one of the new administration's priorities, to look at it and reach that view themselves about whether it is capable of delivering what's required, and if not, make the required changes to ensure that it does deliver what's required.
Okay, thank you for that. Adam Richards, you indicated you'd like to say something.
Thank you, Chair. And for the purposes of tape, my name is Adam Richards. I'm the Director of Finance at BCP Council. I just wanted to take the opportunity to emphasise something that Councillor Phipps has probably just referred to, and that's the fact that the Chief Executive's Authority undertook an internal governance review. results of that internal governance review, along with an independent governance review by the Department of Levelling Up Housing Communities, was presented in a report to Cabinet yesterday. And that report included a significant action plan with regards to steps that the new administration are intent on taking to address the points and the matters raised in that report. In that report, there are a number of references to items that are also included in this report tonight. Indeed, when you look at the management responses, there is a lot of referencing to that other report and the actions that are outlined in that other report, because they're all the same issues and they're all dovetailed together. The reference to transformation, I think if we look forward, I think we can be positive in the fact that this administration has appointed a portfolio holder for transformation, and he's actually sat across from me, Councillor Hanna, over the other side of the room. And not only that, is that the leader of the council has established a cross-party member working group to look at the fundamental issues that have been raised, and hopefully address those in a more detailed way, and then bring back recommendations for Cabinet's consideration moving forward. Hopefully that helps with some of that context.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hannah, you actually indicated you want to speak and your name's been mentioned, so here's your opportunity to make your contribution, please.
Thank you. I was simply going to reflect the fact that I have very much the same kind of concerns that has been mentioned by our auditor and been mentioned by several members of the committee who have already spoken. Adam has already indicated that we are making moves to look at the transformation programme in more detail, and I'm delighted that the leader made the decision to introduce the transformation working group as of this week. I'm delighted that group leaders have nominated representatives from various groups to that, and I've been discussing today a way forward so that we can get a meeting up and running within a month, that we can get a programme of review established, and that will be by that group. But in addition to that, we are also going to be bringing a report to Cabinet, and it's not in my gift, but I certainly hope that Overview and Scrutiny will be inviting a report themselves and scrutinising the programme in their way. There has been mention of lack of identification of savings, and there's already been reference to the fact that we have inherited as an administration what we have inherited, which was promises of savings with nothing actually itemised. That clearly has not been helpful. What I have asked for is for officers to start itemising savings, and that work has been going on already over the summer. It's due to be completed roughly at the end of this month, beginning of October, and I look forward to seeing exactly what itemised savings can be identified. So I'm not going to say totally in control, there is no problem. That would be extremely foolish. What I can say is work is being undertaken to get on top of the situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Salmon, you indicated, and then after you, Mike Cox again.
Yeah, just sorry, do I have to ask you to ask Peter something now, or am I all right just to fire away my questions?
Ask your questions. Yes, please ask your question.
So I was very interested in the methodology behind the report, as I can't see a lot of quantitative data, a bunch of facts and figures and tables, which is what I'd normally like to see when you're analysing an organisation and how efficient it is and whatnot. Because my suspicion is that given the economic situation nationally, globally and whatever, there is just not enough money going into local authorities, and that's why they're falling over. That's why they're not delivering and whatnot. And I'm just curious about the statements made about children's services and the fact that there are some efficiency savings to be made, because I'm not sure if by that you mean they could be doing more with the same amount of funding, or they could be doing what they're doing but with less funding, and if there was some kind of quantitative analysis that led you to either one of those conclusions. So are there similar local authorities that are delivering on par, you know, so they've got a similar demographic and need and whatnot, and they're doing just as well, if not better, for less money. Because I'm curious what it is about children's services that's inefficient, that's been identified in the report. Because my worry is and no reflection on the quality of your work, but your brief is so narrow that you're only looking at, is the council doing what it said it would do? So the transformation programme, it's not hitting its own targets, but it wouldn't have identified your analysis in my mind if the targets for transformation programme had set at the outset were just totally unrealistic. So I just want to know quantitative basis for a lot of the statements in there. Is that available? Is that a document I've just missed because I'm disorganised?
Yeah, and it's a good question. What I will do, I did mention in my presentation, I'm joined by Jonathan Meek. I will hand over to Jonathan in a minute, but I'm conscious there was a few sub questions within that. So let me just pick up a couple of those first. So you talked about, is this just a reflection of the wider pressures on local government? And I think to varying degrees, every council that I've worked with, and I've worked with many, are struggling and finding it increasingly difficult to balance the books. And I've set some of the reasons for that out in the report. Austerity, you know, it's been going on for almost a decade now. Ever increasing expectations from the public, you know, and during the cost of living crisis, inevitably demand for services increases. Your unit costs are increasing exponentially with energy bills and pay awards, and it makes it very difficult to square the circle. And if I look around a lot of councils, there are still some councils that haven't been fully tested because they've been sitting on very healthy reserves that have enabled them to support their budget, and they will no doubt be able to continue to do that for some time. But those number of councils are diminishing, particularly the upper tier councils where you've got health and social care, and you've got adults and children's, which are invariably, in terms of costs, increasing significantly year on year. And that's why it's so important that councils prioritise their focus on those areas that are most important to them. You have statutory responsibilities, you have discretionary ones, but it's not as clear as that. It's not black and white as that, and there's lots of grey areas, and there's the level of service provision. So good councils who are, despite that, of maintaining the financial sustainability, are able to strike that balance and make the difficult decisions where appropriate and focus on their priorities. And the children's services issue, the criticism there is purely reflected the fact that not all the information in this report comes directly from us as Grant Thornton. We rely on other regulators, other people that scrutinise councils, including Ofsted. Ofsted have been into BCP. They came in 2020 and they said inadequate. And there's been lots of, you've had statutory notice. And then since then, there's been lots of revisits, and they've made comments, some of which have been positive and have indicated a generally positive direction of travel. But there's still concerns in there. And until you've had another full inspection and your rating increases from inadequate, that criticism will continue to be in our report. And if it's in there for a long period of time, we begin to question whether the council has the capability of turning the council around in that particular service area and bringing it up to a higher level of assessment from Ofsted. I'll just very briefly, Jonathan, is there anything else that you wanted to add on the quantitative side of data within the report generally for Councillor Salmon?
Yeah, so I can touch on just on some of the quantitative data that we use. So across all the local authorities that we look at, we've got a tool called CFO Insights, which looks at benchmarking how local authorities perform, and that looks at unit cost for services per head of population, taking data from the revenue outturn returns that all local authorities tend to DLUC. We do some benchmarking on that informs our work. In the instance of the report that you've got in front of you, that was used probably not as much detail as it is elsewhere, given sort of the scale of issues that we have found and focused on in our work that Peter's already gone through, because in a lot of cases it just sort of already told us what we already knew from what was shown in the MTFS, that the council has got some areas of high spend, has got some significant challenges. That data is available. It's not sort of front and centre of the report, given the the wider challenges that are mentioned in there. But that data is available, and broadly it shows that the bench. I'm sure this is not come as a surprise to you, that the council benchmarks high in terms of unit cost across those key areas of children's social care, adult social care, culture and related services, planning, development, and environmental and regulatory services, all benchmarks high in terms of per head of population cost, which aligns with obviously the scale of financial challenge the council's facing and the need for that transformation programme to go and address those areas of focus. So that sort of brings a bit more of a view onto the quantitative data that we have. So it does inform our work, but it doesn't probably sit front and centre of this report, given sort of the focus of areas that we've wanted to focus on and have already touched on in this meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Cox, I think you indicated you want to speak again.
Well, yes, just to comment on the transformation, and actually what I was going to say has already been said by Adam and Councillor Hannah, but I just wanted to state that we've recently got a tool, or certainly I've recently seen a tool which gives us benchmarking against other councils, and that is certainly an enormous assistance in terms of knowing which areas that we need to focus on in terms of our efficiencies. And just to give you an example, the cost in terms of our adult social care seems to be higher than most of our equivalents, and therefore that needs to be looked at. And so, I think that is an improvement. I just wanted to comment on one or two of things that have been said about transformation. I think when this council came into being from a merger of different councils, there were two elements in which we could save money. One was economies of scale, and in many respects that was the low-hanging fruit, and that has been taken. It was taken at the beginning, but the harder one is transformation, and that means changing the way we do things, and that's the one that we've as a council, in my opinion, anyway, failed to get a grips with mostly. However, I know, just to give you an example, that the accounting system has been changed as of the 1st of April, and that is a huge exercise, as I'm sure Adam will confirm, and has taken a lot of work to bed in. But when it is bedded in, there will be savings to be made from that, and I suspect that when that's replicated amongst other services, then there should be savings arising. But I'll leave transformation to the expert, as in Councillor Hannah.
Okay, thank you for that. Basically, the recommendation in front of us this evening is to note this report. I'll just read out what the recommendation is. It's recommended the Audit and Governance Committee notes the findings, recommendations and management comments in relation to the External Auditor's Annual Report 21, 22, 22, 23, Value for Money Arrangements Reports. And the second bullet point says, the unusual approach for reporting both the 21-22 and the 22-23 years as an agreed pragmatic approach to resolve and catch up on recent historic delays within the external audit process. So I would be looking for somebody to propose and to second that recommendation, please. Councillor Colley proposes, and Councillor second. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. Barber and your colleague, for presenting your report this evening. As I said in my opening address, yes, you're on very tight timescales. I think some of our officers picked up one or two typos which were sorted out, though I would refer all members to page 77 of the agenda, which is the list of definitions. And if you look at what BCP is defined as being, we're down as being called Brighton, Christchurch and Poole Council. I think some members who represent Poole and Christchurch parts of BCP might actually prefer to be linked with Brighton, and then I don't know, but equally would Bournemouth want to be linked with Hove? I don't know, but it's if that could be corrected perhaps in your next report. I say these typos do creep in, but I'll just bring that to your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so you can free your colleague to depart now, because we are now moving on to item 7 on the agenda, and I'll just read it out. It's the review. Sorry, we didn't actually take a vote on that, but I don't think it is necessary to take a vote on that recommendation to note the report. You know, yeah, but could we perhaps actually, just for the record, just show our hands that we accept the report? Thank you. So going back to item 7, review of the council's constitution, recommendations of the constitutional review working group. Now, this group met a week or so ago. Councillor Phipps is the chairperson of that working group and is here this evening, and are most of the members of the working party. But probably to start it off, I would bring in Richard Jones, the relevant Officer from Democratic Services, to present his report. So, Richard, if you could present it, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And firstly, if I could formally advise of that correction. I know it was referred to in one of the in the question from Mr. McKinstry, but formally ask members to note the correction that's in page 81, paragraph 16, third bullet point. The reference to 10 meetings should read 12 meetings. Thank you, Chairman. Again, with your agreement, Chairman, I intend to introduce the report and the proposed changes, and Councillor Phipps, as chair of the working group, may wish to then add additional comments. And then between us, hopefully we can answer any questions from members. If I can just do a quick introduction, really for the benefit of new members to the committee, any suggestions to changes to the Constitution are normally referred in the first instance through the Constitution Review Working Group. That is appointed by this committee, and indeed at the last meeting you confirmed that membership for the current year. The working group then recommends any changes back to this committee, and this committee then recommends to full council. Full council is the body that must approve any changes to the Constitution. Any recommendations arising from this evening will be presented to council next week. The format of the report has probably evolved over time in an attempt to probably refine and assist members both of this committee and at full council to understand those comments in a fluid way. So it's sort of evolved, and I'm happy to make further adjustments as we move forward to assist in that process. What we've tried to do is theme the suggested changes. There are 3 in this case in this report. They are allocated an issue number, and that issue number will be held through all the recommendations as they go through to full council. So any referencing back to the original report hopefully will be consistent in that process. Any proposed textual changes we try to highlight through track changes. If those track changes are limited to one section of a part of the Constitution, we will try and embed that into the body of the report with a red outlined box. But if in the case of ONS for this evening's item, where there are substantial changes to various parts of the Constitution, we will then append those to the report as a separate appendix, but again with track changes showing. So that's just a very quick introduction. As I said, there are 3 issues for consideration this evening, which I'll introduce in turn. Chairman, I don't know if you wish me, probably appropriate at the end of each of those items, to pause for any questions on those particular items, and then maybe come back to the recommendations in the end.
Yes, I think it would be best, and you know, we refer people. It's page 79 that we're looking to in terms of the shopping list of the recommendations, 3 principal recommendations of changes. And if you could deal with the first one first. I'm thinking, speaking from the chair, that I don't think for this committee it's necessary, unless people think otherwise, to take separate votes on those 3, and we could do it collectively at the end. But if you could introduce the first one, which is a bit of fine tuning basically, but over to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. So issue 1 is titled Overview and Scrutiny Structure and Arrangements. And the existing arrangements for overview and scrutiny at BCP, which has 4 committees of equal status, which meets 5 times per year. There's a diagram that's shown as Appendix 1 to the report on page 87. That's the coloured chart, but I don't think you need to necessarily go and look at that at this stage. These arrangements were introduced in May 2022 following a previous review. Following the elections in May, the new administration indicated a desire to review a number of arrangements for various things, but including overview and scrutiny, and identified this as a priority, which has triggered this report through Constitutional Review Working Group and onto this committee. So paragraphs 12 to 15 on page 81 of the report sets out the headline components of the current arrangements, the intended objectives at that time, consequences that have been experienced, and highlights the recommended best practice for, in particular, cross-cutting issues. The proposed changes to the Constitution, the working group discussed at some length the thoughts, the ideas that were put forward initially, which also included input from the chairs of both the corporate and community and the place overview and scrutiny committees. And the headline changes that are reflected in the proposed changes in the Constitution are to rename the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee to the Overview and Scrutiny Board. The board to have overall responsibility for overview and scrutiny function oversight, development, reporting, call-in and cross-cutting issues in line with that best practice. The schedule of meetings for the board to be increased to 12 meetings per municipal year to shadow meetings of cabinet. The frequency of meetings of the other committees to remain at 5 meetings per municipal year. To rename the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee to Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The remit of the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee to be narrowed, with the functions within the Dynamic Places portfolio being transferred to the Overview and Scrutiny Board. This would increase the ability of the committee to examine issues in greater detail from a sustainability perspective. The Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee being permitted to appoint 2 independent co-opted non-voting members to that committee, and the changes to take effect from the 29th of September 2023. Appendix 2 is then the illustration on page 88 that illustrates that structure in a graphical form, which members may find useful. Okay, I haven't, so after you. Yeah, I haven't quite finished just yet, Chair, if that's okay. So can I just highlight a couple of other issues that I need to draw to members' attention? So resources, paragraphs 20 to 27 outlines the pressures on resources within the Democratic Services team to meet formal meetings. Your Section 151 officer referred to the DLUC Assurance Review recommendations, and members will be aware of an overview and scrutiny action plan that has gone through each of the committees and is going to full council next week. Democratic Services has a number of components within each of those plans to support, and I believe the service at the moment is now at maximum capacity within the service. To accommodate any further meetings, the report highlights the additional cost to cover those in a full year for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at 14,700. And there's likely to be an increase in the SRA for a full year for the chair of the ONS board in line with previous arrangements. Again, they are all in the budget proposals for 2024-25. There probably will be a need to incur additional costs in the current year to support the changes, but we will attempt to absorb those within our current budgets within Democratic Services. The Constitution changes proposed are set out in the Appendix 3. Again, this is the one that carries on to various parts. There's 4 parts of the Constitution that require changing, so they're set out. I'm not going to go through those in detail from pages 89 to 114. The recommendation in relation to overview and scrutiny is recommendation A on page 79. That relates to the changes to the arrangements, but one element that isn't covered is the setting and the agreement of setting dates for the new overview, for the overview and scrutiny board for the remaining of 23-24. And I'd like to suggest through you, Chair, an additional recommendation in addition to A to subject to the approval of AI, if you are minded to support the changes, that authority to agree the calendar of meeting dates for the Overview and Scrutiny Board for the remainder of 23-24 be delegated by Council to the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I can display that on screen if members wish me to do that, but that is in line with the previous arrangements we had when we changed the arrangements before. So I'll pause at that point, Chairman. I appreciate that's quite a lot I've just gone through. If Councillor Phipps wishes to add anything or answer any questions.
Yeah, I think Councillor Phipps is going to speak now, but whilst she's doing that, if you could perhaps share that extra bit of text perhaps on the screen so people can see that around the table and online. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't really add anything to that. It was very, very good. Went through the whole thing. Excellent. Thank you very much. The only thing I would just say is that the timeline we're working on for bringing the Overview and Scrutiny Board to be a board rather than just the committee is that obviously it's come here this evening. Hopefully we can agree this. It will need to go to full council on the 12th of September next week. And the implementation is likely to be the 29th of September in time for papers to be issued to the O&S board, as it will be then, for their meeting on the 9th of October. Because the sooner we get this implemented, the better. And we go back to having a board with overall responsibility. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. And if you need a proposal, I would very much like to propose this with the additional recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, I've just got a question myself. The other committee, the Environment Committee in place, that's proposed to have 2 independent members. Obviously, between now and the 29th of September, they're not going to be appointed. Can you just explain very briefly the process of their appointment and how they're going to be chosen? Is there going to be, presumably, that committee is going to choose them?
I don't think I can actually do that, but they're going into Environment and Place. They're not going to be on the board, and the board timetable is what I gave.
The independent members will be on the Environment and Place.
Okay.
But
so
the process of actually those 2 independent people being appointed, how does that actually happen?
So maybe Richard would like to answer that one.
Mr. Jones.
Through you, Chair. So the report does say that. I didn't actually say that in my summary, but the report says that the arrangement, similar to your arrangements that you received at this committee, at your last meeting to appoint independent persons, will actually be presented to the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee to agree those arrangements at that point. So that will be to one of their first meetings that they have to agree those arrangements and do that recruitment. And Chairman, I have just shared on the screen, perhaps Sarah can just share that for those who are viewing online, the suggested changes. So recommendation A is exactly the same wording to the existing A, but renumbered as A Roman numeral 1. And then the new additional recommendation is A Roman numeral 2. And as I read before, subject to approval of AI above, authority to agree the calendar of meeting dates for the Overview and Scrutiny Board for the remainder of 2023-24 be delegated by Council to the Overview and Scrutiny Board.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no more debate or questions or queries on that, perhaps as Councillor Phipps suggested, we could take a vote on item A as amended. And Councillor Phipps, you want to propose it? Somebody could second it?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Councillor Castle will second it. So can we have a show of hands or any dissent reference item A as recommended? So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to B. Back to Mr. Jones to summarise what's in his report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully this is slightly shorter. So issue 2 is headed Salary Sacrifice Schemes for Councillors. I refer members to paragraph 30 on page 83 of the pack. As outlined in the report, the Council operates benefit schemes for employees, including a cycle to work scheme. The purpose of this issue that is before you is to determine whether to extend the scheme to include councillors or benefit schemes to councillors. The recommendation is to enable this through an update to Part 7 of the scheme of members' allowances. The proposed changes will enable councillors to participate in relevant benefit schemes. As schemes may vary over time, it is proposed to delegate authority to the Chief Executive to determine the relevant benefit schemes for councillors. The changes to the Constitution are set out, in this case, in the body of the report, paragraph 35 on page 84, and recommendations B, Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2 are set out on page 79. Again, I'll pause at this point for any additional information from Councillor Phipps or answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Just a question, again, may well be in your report, just for clarification. This arrangement already exists for members of staff, officers, so we're just extending it so that councillors benefit from the same tax incentive that exists to officers already.
I have nothing to add to it. That's reasonably straightforward as far as I can see.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any comment or queries or Councillor Chapman Law?
Yeah, it's just on. I mean, thank you for getting this through. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for me. I think the cycle work scheme has got its issues. We need to. It would be nice to be able to push it up to LGA or whoever to have another look at it, because it's incredibly limiting in what it can do. If you've got two part-time jobs, the allowance can only go off of one, which can then severely limit the allowance that you're allowed. For some bizarre reason, people who are on higher salaries get increased discount because they're on higher tax rate. They get 50% off, which is just, when they're the people that can most afford to have an expensive bike. It's also limited to a relatively small number of suppliers and manufacturers and employers as well. So bikes are supposed to be for everybody, and in theory, and the cycle of work scheme doesn't seem to encourage that very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more discussion or debate? Otherwise, perhaps Councillor Phipps, you could again propose that, and then we can move on.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose as set out for this item.
Councillor Chapman Lord, will you second that? Yes. Okay. And then again, perhaps a show of hands, so that's unanimous again. Thank you for that. Item C, which is the third change, this is in relation to council meetings. Mr. Jones again.
Again, thank you, Chairman. Again, I'll refer members to paragraph 37 on page 84 of the report. This is issue 3, schedule of meetings, change of date, time and venue for council. This proposal seeks to amend the constitution to permit the chair of council, in consultation with the political group leaders, to alter the date, time or venue of council meetings in exceptional circumstances beyond the control of the council, or where it would be detrimental to the effective delivery of council business to proceed with the scheduled meeting. The existing provisions in Part 4D of the Constitution provides the ability for the chair to convene extraordinary meetings. There is a general presumption against altering council meeting dates, times or locations, but the Constitution is silent on when this general presumption may not apply. So the changes seek to clarify that position, and the changes are set out in paragraph 39 of the report, with a new rule of 1.2 as shown in red. Again, recommendation C on page 79 sets out the formal recommendation. Again, I'll pause at this point for Councillor Phipps to add any additional information or answer any questions.
Councillor Phipps.
Yeah, it's not a quite simple one. I mean, we did debate this just at the working group, and I think we've made sure that the wording is pretty clear, that really, as you heard, there is a presumption not to change dates and to change things, but if it's absolutely essential, and I think we've made it clear within the wording. There was quite a bit of debate about it, so we did give this quite a lot of thought.
Thank you for that. And in fact, there were 2 instances in the past 2 years where we actually had to go through some bizarre procedure to effectively cancel a meeting. During the height of COVID, there was a council meeting published and due, and also sadly when Queen Elizabeth died last year, again, we had to go through a process of people not turning up for a meeting, but the meeting actually had to effectively start, and we were told not to turn up. So it is something which I'm sure other councils are doing to their constitution as well. Councillor Connolly?
Yes, I was just going to add to that that I think we talked about this, and what we really don't want is to inadvertently have the wording such that it goes against the previous sentence, that there's a general presumption against alterations to the date, as we think it's very important. There are many important reasons why you wouldn't want it to be too easy to move the date around at late notice. I think we've done that, so I'm happy with that, but I think it would be useful to be on the record in the minutes that we're very, very keen that the general presumption against alterations is still the primary intention there.
Okay, thanks for that. Again, I'm going to ask Councillor Fitz to propose it, and perhaps Councillor Colley could second it.
So I propose I set out, thank you.
Yep, seconded.
Okay, again, just for the record, show of hands, so show it's unanimous. Again, thank you. That's very good. There is actually a last recommendation D there, which with Mr. Jones, do we need to vote on that or just note that? I'll take your advice.
Yes, please. Again, Chairman, if you could vote on that. So just for the record, recommendation D to the report just provides for any other necessary and consequential technical and formatting related updates to be made to the Constitution by the monitoring officer. So in other words, we won't change anything fundamental, but if we've missed, for instance, a change to the place overview and scrutiny committee, which should be environment and place, for instance, we can pick up those changes as consequential changes. So yes, if you could vote on that, please, Chairman.
Okay, just to change, I'll propose that, and Councillor Phipps can second it. Thank you very much. Again, show your hands, just for the record, unanimous. Thank you very much. And that, I believe, is all that we need to decide. So at that juncture, I make it about 7:20. That would be the close of the meeting. Thank you for those watching online and those in the room. Hopefully it won't be as hot at our next meeting later on this year. Thank you very much.